Welcome back to the Roadside Rescue YouTube channel. Welcome back to the Roadside Rescue YouTube channel. Pretty cold this morning, and we've got a couple jobs, so I'll probably make two different videos. This first one, we're going to be replacing an oil pan for a young man out here going to school, I believe he mentioned, but it was quoted by another shop a lot of money to replace this oil pan gasket. So we're going to replace it for him for a much better cost and help him out since he's at school. So partially helping out in this video are the channel members. I mean, they help out in everything, but some of the income that I'm going to be making is sponsored by the channel members of this video. So it's a part fixing it forward. I'm going to let this one out for everybody to see and just let you know if you're interested in becoming a channel member and supporting videos like this where we can help people out who are really needing it. Then check out the link in the description down below, or if you see the join button next to the subscribe button down below. So without further ado, we'll get over there. And people often ask what do I do when it's cold outside. It's not cold yet. I mean, it's like 40 degrees this morning, but when it's cold, pretty much the only answer I have is just be cold. I'm out here working regardless. So we'll head over here, it's close by, and meet up with him. We'll get his car and get that oil pan gasket replaced. So here we go. All right, so we just got the car pulled in back here, and we're gonna get this oil pan gasket replaced. We've got new oil, which maybe got left. Oh, there it is. So we've got new oil, probably a new filter. I told them if they had a recent oil change, they didn't have to worry about it. But here we are, and it's just been slowly leaking oil. Again, was quoted out by a different shop for a lot more, so we just got it up on the ramps. Got some jack stands under there, and we'll get ready to go here. All right, first thing we got to do is drain the oil and remove, there's like a cross member under there. Let's see this bad boy here. And well, maybe we don't have to remove that, maybe just the exhaust. Yeah, sometimes like in the manuals and stuff, they'll tell you have to remove something. It looks like I may not have to since the oil pan's over here. It is nice and warm because they just drove it here, but I don't mind working on warm vehicles as much in the cold mornings in the winter whenever it's freezing outside. Keeps my hands a little warm, but yeah, just looking at it, I don't think at all I'll have to remove this cross member here. Looks like it might be pretty straightforward. At the most, this exhaust, so I'm gonna go ahead and hit it with some penetrating fluid just in case. It's probably gonna smoke a bit because they just got here. So we've got zip ties holding this up, so we'll just replace it with some zip ties and we'll get started. Drain that oil and put some penetrating fluid on that exhaust. All right, so we'll remove this little shield right here. Sometimes when stuff gets this busted up, especially on like my own vehicle, I'm like not even worried about replacing it, but everything has a function and for the most part, so just should be able to just tuck out of the way there. We don't have to worry about removing it all the way. As you can see, just fold it out of the way. Oil filters right here. They must have lived close anyways. It's not too hot, so my hand can easily just rest against that. It's probably about 120 degrees, just nice and warm. And we'll hit these with penetrating fluid. Hopefully I don't have to remove this exhaust pipe. I mean, I say it looks a little rusty. This is Utah rust. Looks a little rusty, so I don't want to, you know, deal with the headache of busting off bolts or anything like that, but I doubt that'll happen. So fingers crossed, and I may be able to get away with just undoing it up here. My only worry is if the whatever's coming down this far, it's a weird shape, so I doubt that's the bottom of the pistons reaching down there. If there is something sticking all the way down, like the pickup or something in a weird location, I won't be able to just fold this out of the way, you know, kind of bend it out of the way. Then, you know, I may have to create a little bit more room. Hopefully I can just tilt it out of the way and be able to slide it past the pickup or whatever else comes down there. So I'm gonna get another mat for my neck since I'm gonna be holding my neck up a little bit, just looking around. Hit this with penetrating fluid and we'll drain this oil as well. Alright, goal is to not make too much of a mess in this parking lot here. I'm just working in a parking lot, kind of in between where we both are. And this is just the best place with the most space. It's a church parking lot, I'll just go ahead and say it. Out here in Utah there's tons of churches. I've never had issues working in these parking lots. They're huge and they're unoccupied all week long. And as long as I don't make a mess, again, I've never had any sort of issues using these church parking lots. But, you know, technically you're probably not supposed to, so I don't advocate doing that for that reason. But, again, I've never had any issues, so. But you never know, today may be the day. Nice. That was not over torqued, which is definitely the most common issue with these drain plugs. Make sure we've got our rag here handy. Our drain plug set up just right. There we go. A couple of drops there. It's good to change oil when it's warm too, because it drains out a lot easier. So. Alright, we'll let that drain, and I'll start undoing the oil pan after that. Then we got to do some cleaning and stuff to get that new gasket to stick. So far so good though. Alright, that's about done draining, so I'm going to plug it back up and then start removing this oil pan. There's a bunch of 10mm holding it on, and we should be able to pry that off, clean off the old gasket, and apply a new one. Okay, so far so good. No oil on the ground here. The other thing we have to worry about is when we pull the oil pan, making sure we keep all that oil contained. I'm going to go ahead and tighten this plug back up so I don't forget. I won't be needing to mess with that again. When I pull it out, I may put a rag down there to just absorb some of that old oil as well. Obviously, there's still going to be a bit in there. I just don't want to over torque those. Now I'll clean off the pan. It doesn't have to be super duper clean. Just kind of get most of the junk off of there. And it was obviously leaking from this side right here. And I think we're good to go. I think we can just take these bolts off and get this pan out of the way. Rather than deal with the exhaust, I might just stick a small wrench up there just to get around it and see if I get it off. So we'll start loosening those up. The biggest key to not stripping bolts out is to use a 6-point socket. I never use 12-point sockets. So, just something to note. Alright, I've got these really shallow sockets I'm going to use to get up behind that exhaust and loosen up these last 3. That's all that's left. And some of these were just really loose. Some of them felt fine. They're probably 18 foot-pounds of torque is the torque number on them. Some of these were probably like 3 or, you know, 1 or 2 to get off, just really loose. Almost could do it by finger. All right, I've got this small little driver as well that I'll use under there. Since there's even less room on just this one in particular, which is obviously going to be the tightest one. Some of those would come off super easy. Not this one. Let's go. There it is. Every now and then I forget to leave the door of my truck all the way up. When I'm pulling stuff out, I just open it like halfway. And every other time I do that, I jump up in there and smack myself in the head. So my head's hurting right now, to say the least. Happens. Yeah, so I'll use like this impact driver and stuff to take bolts out. I always finish them off by hand when I put them back together to make sure that the torque is right. I won't use a torque wrench on these because they're 18 foot-pounds, and I've got a pretty good feel for most torques in that range, especially 18 foot-pounds, which is like the most common torque for anything on an engine, you know, other than like heads and stuff, which get a lot more. So let's see, 2 more up there. Be able to just put this socket on there, finish them by hand. Let's see. All right, so there we have it. I've got all the bolts out of this oil pan. I'm gonna break the seal here with a pry bar, just a flat pry bar I have. I'll stick it in there and kind of pry out. There's all our bolts. There's 2 studs, so 2 of these had nuts, and the rest were just these little bolts. We'll pop it loose. I'm gonna get some rags under it in case it dripped a little bit of oil, and then we'll clean up that gasket and get the new one on there. Should be pretty straightforward. The only issue I may have now is just being able to get it past this exhaust, but it's not the end of the world if I have to take it off. I think with just these 2 bolts, we'll get enough room under there. I just don't like messing with exhaust stuff if I don't have to, having to replace gaskets, risking breaking bolts and stuff. So we'll try and not do that if we don't have to. All right, so I have this nice little pry bar, kind of like a small Wonder Bar, also made by Titan, but I should be able to just get underneath the pan here and start prying it loose. All right, there it goes. Took a bit of persuading, but once you break that seal, it comes apart pretty easy. Let's see. Right under there. Let's see if you can see that. Bingo, didn't have to remove that exhaust, so that's awesome. And that pan's got a little bit of oil in it, and it's gonna drip just a bit, so I'm gonna leave that pan underneath it. As you can see, pretty much straightforward, nothing tricky needed to be done to get this off. So we'll clean up the old gasket material here. As you can see, we'll clean out that pan as well at the end, so I've got a bucket up there with a funnel I'll pour it into. But for right now, I'll just scrape everything, I'll let it fall into the pan, and we'll clean up that pan afterwards. There you have it. And I actually kind of like replacing oil pans. As long as they're straightforward, it's kind of a fun job. So I've got this, that same pry bar has a sharp edge on one side. It's really good for cleaning up old gaskets. You just put it flush and just pull it across. Let me see if I can push that dipstick up from here. Oh, I pulled the dipstick. I got that dipstick pulled up, so it's not catching. All right, I've pretty much got this area all cleaned up, the bottom of the block here. So now I'm gonna clean up this pan, and then we'll get it cleaned up with some spray, some rags, and get the new gasket material on. But I'm gonna take this up into the truck to clean it, this pan here, so I can empty it out as well, since it's got a bit of oil in there. All right, so here we are. I got this oil pan all cleaned up. I used a little wire wheel around the edge on my drill after I scraped it. And with these, there's no like made gasket for these, so you don't have to worry so much about like not using a wire wheel to get little microscopic scratches in there. Some vehicles, you got to be super careful with your torquing and everything. These, since you use forma gasket, which I'm just going to use this high torque gray. You can use whichever one on an oil pan pretty much, usually the black, but I've got the gray one right now. And up here as well, like where I use that pry bar to get it out, there's a little bit of marring right there. You know, I tried to keep from doing that, and you know, I got just a little bit of marks on there, as you can see. But with forma gasket, you know, you just put it on nice and thick, and you don't really have to worry about those small scratches and stuff. The biggest worry is having one that goes in a channel all the way across. Again, with forma gasket, you're pretty safe even with those, but it didn't even go all the way across. So we'll put our forma gasket on both sides, let it cure for about 15 minutes when we lightly touch them together, and then tighten them down. All right, we'll get our gasket material up. Should use about this whole tube on this oil pan. All right, I'm gonna use both hands now. That's the idea. You don't really want to start and stop it too much. Again, forma gasket's pretty forgiving, but I'm having a little bit of trouble with this one hand, as you can see, so I'm gonna use both. I'll just show you when it's done. All right, so I've got gasket material on both ends here. We're gonna go ahead and join them up, kind of scooch them around a little bit to seal up. Let it sit for 15 minutes, and then we'll tighten it down. See here, can't see anything. It's a little touchy once you get the stuff on there, because you want to slide it up without touching anything, but I've got that totally turned sideways. There we go. Okay. All right, so we get it on, kind of wiggle it a little, and we'll put a couple of bolts in to hold it in place. A couple of nuts, maybe on those studs. Just loosely tighten those so they stay touching. Maybe put one bolt back here to kind of triangulate them. Cool. Okay. Now we'll let those sit. I'll check back in about 10 minutes. I'll probably start all the bolts actually right now, but not tighten them down. And then in about 10 minutes after that, it'll be ready to tighten down. Ooh, just blinded myself, looked right into the sun. All right, so it's been about 15 minutes. It's ready to tighten down, and everything's in place. There's lots of gasket material coming out around all the edges, so that's a great sign that it's sealed up. We've got to clean up that exhaust pipe. It's going to probably smoke a bit regardless. And then we'll clean up our tools that have got forma gasket on them, which is always a little bit of a pain, but I didn't make too much of a mess. A couple drops got on the sidewalk here, I mean on the spot, but I kind of scrubbed them up, so it's not too big of a deal. And I'll use some solvent on them probably as well. So we'll tighten these down and fill it up with oil, and this will be done. All right, that's it. We're all tightened up down here. We'll be done down here. We'll fill it up with oil, and we'll get it off of these ramps and jack stands, and it'll be a done deal. All right, there we have it. This is 𝘮𝑍𝖆 done. I'm Ernest. This is the Roadside Rescue YouTube channel. Thanks for watching. We'll see you on the next episode.